Congratulations and welcome to the Arcadian family. Enclosed is your master key. You'll need this key to let yourself in and access certain parts of the hotel. Enter through the main doors by 10 p.m. for training. Your first shift begins promptly at 11 p.m. Training will be available through the door labeled Staff Only behind the front desk. Please watch all training materials before starting your shift. We appreciate your commitment to rebuilding the legacy of the Arcadian. I'm curious and admittedly a little nervous. I made my way to the hotel that night. The Arcadian Hotel was just as I'd imagined. The exterior was a fading memory of elegance. It had worn stone walls, tall windows with exterior spotlights that no longer worked, and brass handrails that were way past due for polishing. I glanced at the clock on my phone, 9:45. The hotel's lobby was huge and open with a grand staircase at the center that split off in two directions as it went up. The floor was polished stone that reflected the light from above in dull patches. It looked clean but not new. More like it had been cleaned many times over a long period without ever being replaced or updated. The ceiling was high with old brass light fixtures and chandeliers hanging down. The glass on them was intact but had lost its shine. The walls were covered in patterned wallpaper that looked faded in places, especially near the corners and edges where it had started to age unevenly. The cleanliness was barely masking the smell of mildew. "Welcome to the Tower of Terror," I said to myself. The front desk was long and wooden and stretched across the lobby. It was well kept, but worn along the edges where people would have leaned or set things down over the years. Behind it was a small wooden door with a simple sign that read, "Staff Only." Inside the staff room, I found a TV set atop a rolling cart and a row of numbered VHS tapes stacked next to it. The first tape had a label on it in looping script. Arcadian Employee Training, 1953. Next to it was another handwritten note with instructions. Watch all tapes in order. Do not skip ahead. I slid the first tape into the VHS player and turned on the TV. The screen flickered, a hum crackled through the speakers, and then it jumped to life. A video came up which looked in rough shape, clearly a copy of the original 16mm film, but this one looked like a copy of a copy. A cheerful man with a classic transatlantic accent wearing a sharp 1950s suit stood in front of a pristine version of the lobby that I had just walked through. Hello there. Welcome to the Arcadian family," he began. "We are delighted to have you on board as a steward of one of New York's finest luxury establishments." His tone was light, upbeat, but he had a strange way of pausing between each sentence and just to smile. "Let's begin with a few simple procedures to keep our guests safe and happy," he continued. "Remember, our guests may at times be unique, but they deserve the utmost courtesy and the finest of service. Now please, follow these essential guidelines." The first few videos went over the basics. Instructions on how to clean, address guests, check-ins and check-outs, when to check the guest log, and where to find supplies. But on the final video, things took a turn for the strange. "Congratulations on making it to the end of your training. Attaboy. Now let's cover a few final essentials to keep our guests smiling and keep you right as rain. Listen close now, these pointers are real important. Rule number 1, if the elevator takes you to the basement, do not be alarmed. Simply close your eyes and stand still until it moves back up. No peeking." The man chuckled in a practiced, rehearsed way, as though he had been told to laugh but wasn't sure why. My mind tried to make sense of his words. Why close my eyes? Why would the elevator just randomly take me to the basement? Rule number 2. If you find a guest wandering the halls between 2 and 4 a.m., gently escort them back to their room. Under no circumstances should you allow them near the front doors. Use a firm hand if needed. If they seem upset, simply assure them that it will all be over soon. The hair on the back of my neck stood up and made me look over my shoulder. All of what would be over? The man's smile remained fixed as he went on with the rules. Rule number 3. Do not look into the mirrors after midnight. Our mirrors sure are something else. We wouldn't want you to become disoriented. Rule number 4. Every night count all the keys on the board. Make sure that all your keys are accounted for. Most importantly, there should always be 4 keys marked for the 10th floor. If one of those keys is missing, lock up the lobby doors, turn off the lights, and wait behind the front desk until dawn. Do not attempt to look for it. The 10th floor, I thought. The hotel doesn't even have 10 floors. He proceeded with a few more rules. Rule number 5. Now listen closely, folks. If a gentleman with a yellow umbrella comes in asking, "Do you have a vacancy?" you must politely reply, "I'm sorry, we have no vacancy." No matter how upset he gets, stay calm and cheerful. That's the way to keep things running smoothly. Rule number 6. Attention night owls. If you find that key 309 is missing, here's what you gotta do. Whip up a ham and cheese sandwich, gather those supplies from the kitchen, and then head on over to room 309 and give a polite knock. Remember, don't look at them. Just hold out that plate and wait until you hear the door close before you step away. You've got it. Rule number 7. Now let's talk about Ronald, our cleaning ace. He waltzes in and says, "I'm here to clean the mess," to which you'll unlock the custodian closet and let Ronald take it away. If he doesn't give you that magic phrase, then simply say, "No cleaning tonight, Ronald." And don't forget to lock the doors tight after he leaves. That's how we keep everything shipshape. Last but not least, rule number 8. Now listen up, friends. It's important that you remember this. Never, and I mean never, enter the management office. If you happen to find the door slightly ajar, just keep on walking and stick to your business. And if you hear any peculiar sounds coming from inside, don't let your curiosity get the better of you. Simply carry on with your tasks. We want to keep everything peachy keen around here. What the hell? I thought. The next few minutes returned to normalcy. He focused on specifics of the hotel layout, explaining what doors led where and the importance of logging any guest encounters on the shift report. The rules that he had given, though, left me with a bad taste. That'll conclude our training. You're now ready to head on out there and knock it out of the park. Thank you again for your commitment to the Arcadian legacy. Finally finished, I switched off the TV. And by then, it was a little after 11 p.m., so I made my way to the front desk to get a feel for my new workspace. The first part of the night was uneventful. The Arcadian was silent except for a soft fluorescent hum. I completed the tasks in the handbook that they had given me. Account for all the keys, straighten the lobby, wipe down the desk. It was eerie being alone in such a big place, but it was manageable. I settled in behind the front desk, scrolling through my phone and waiting for the night to pass by. At around 1:30 in the morning, the front door of the hotel opened. An old man shuffled into the lobby. He wore a faded custodian uniform that looked like it had seen better days, and I could barely make out the name tag reading Ronald as he got closer. He moved slowly, his feet dragging slightly on the worn carpet. I sat up, my mind scrambling to remember the rules for my first encounter with them. I knew that I had to wait for him to say the phrase that would confirm that he was here for his nightly duties. When he finally reached the desk, he looked up at me with weary eyes and said, "I'm here to clean the mess." A wave of relief washed over me as he said it. I quickly unlocked the custodian closet, my hands trembling slightly as I fumbled with the keys. As he pulled out his cart filled with an assortment of cleaning supplies and tools, He glanced at me almost amusingly and asked, "You're new here?" "Yeah, it's my first night. Any tips?" I replied, eager to learn anything that might ease my nerves. "Oh, stick to the rules and you'll be just fine, kid," he said before wheeling his cart onto the elevator. The elevator doors closed with a quiet thud, leaving me alone again with nothing but the hum. Ronald's words did little to ease my nerves. I was trying to figure out what those rules even mean, and why a hotel would even have rules like that to begin with. When I returned to my desk, I noticed almost immediately a space on the key rack. The key was now missing. The key to room 309. Panic rose in my chest as I rifled through the key rack again, hoping that it was just hiding among the others. "Where the hell did it go?" I muttered to myself, feeling a bead of sweat form on my forehead. I had barely left the desk for more than a couple minutes. Had somebody come in while I was with Ronald, or had I just missed it during my last count? I quickly pulled up my notes, scanning for the rule about the key for room 309. There it was. If key 309 is missing, bring a ham and cheese sandwich to the room and knock. Don't look at them. I sighed, resigning myself to follow the rule. Heading into the kitchen, I was surprised to find it fully stocked, despite the hotel's inactivity. The shelves were lined with canned goods and an impressive amount of fresh ingredients, as if they were prepared for a busy night. I quickly gathered the supplies and assembled a simple ham sandwich. With the plate in hand, I took a deep breath and headed for the elevator. The lights flickered as I pressed the button for the 3rd floor, as though the old hotel was struggling to power both the elevator and the lights at the same time. When the doors opened, I stepped into the hallway and made my way toward room 309. It was so quiet up there that I found myself tiptoeing for some reason, the carpet swallowing what little sound my footsteps made. My heart was pounding by the time that I reached the door. I knocked gently and waited. After a few seconds, I heard movement inside, followed by the slow creak of the door opening. The moment that I heard the door begin to open, I lowered my eyes to the floor. I focused on the green carpet in front of me and on not dropping the plate. A moment later, somebody took a hold of it. I could see only the lower edge of the door and a pair of feet out of the corner of my eye. The plate left my hands, but whoever was standing there didn't immediately close the door. They lingered in the doorway for several seconds. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, afraid that even a glance upward might be a mistake. The silence stretched on long enough that I started wondering if they were testing me, waiting for me to look at them. Eventually, the door closed with a soft click. I let out a breath that I hadn't realized I had been holding, and I turned back toward the elevator without wasting any time. Inside, I felt a brief sense of relief returning to the front desk and having made it through my first 2 run-ins with the rules without anything going wrong. But it didn't last long. Who was that, and what would have happened if I had looked up? What kind of hotel was this? The questions kept circling in my mind as the elevator descended back toward the lobby. For a moment, I just stared at the floor indicator, not understanding what was going on. And then the rule came back to me, the one from the training video. If the elevator takes you to the basement, do not be alarmed. Simply close your eyes and stand still until it moves back up. No peeking. The realization hit me immediately. It was taking me to the basement. No, come on, I screamed as the elevator kept descending. I desperately smashed my hand against the buttons, hitting any floor that would possibly bring me back up. But the elevator didn't stop. Forcing myself to calm down, I remembered the rule and I shut my eyes tightly, clenching my fists at my sides. The elevator dinged and the doors opened, unleashing a rush of cold air and a wet, moldy smell that sent a wave of dread through me. I stood there with my back against the elevator wall, shivering in the cold air. And then I heard something moving. A new smell entered my nose and hit me like a punch to the gut. A putrid smell that filled the air and made me gag despite trying not to move. It was a sickening blend of antiquity and sulfur that seemed to wrap around me, making it hard to breathe. The elevator groaned and I felt it rock slightly, as if something heavy had entered with me. I could feel it, whatever it was, right there in front of me, so close that there was no space left between us. My pulse was racing and my face was wet with tears before I even realized that I was crying. I could feel it staring at me like a predator, silently begging me to open my eyes. What was probably only seconds felt like an eternity of pure horror. And then the elevator chimed and I felt it begin to rise. The slow upward motion lasted only a moment before it stopped with another soft chime. I carefully opened my eyes to find the doors already sliding open, revealing the lobby and the grand staircase just beyond. I ran out of the elevator, wiping tears from my face and heading straight to the front doors, ready to quit on the spot. But as I headed to the doors, I noticed dawn was already breaking outside, and an envelope was sitting on the front desk. I didn't know how the time had passed so quickly, but at the time I didn't care to stick around. I grabbed the envelope and left the hotel, the sunlight feeling like a sweet relief. Hesitantly, I opened the envelope, still sniffling like a child. Inside the envelope was $1,000 cash and a note. "Great work on your first shift. As a thank you from management, we have included your pay up front for tomorrow night. If you choose not to return, feel free to keep the money as a courtesy from us, but we hope you do return. You are a valuable addition to the Arcadian Hotel family. Management." At the time, I was fully convinced that I would never return. Back home, though, I paced my small apartment all day, replaying the events of the night and staring at the $1,000 on my coffee table. I wanted to quit. The nightmares and anxiety from that first night were already too much, and something about the place was clearly wrong. But then I thought about my bills, the empty fridge, the weight of my loans pressing in from every direction. Ronald's words looped in my head the whole time. Stick to the rules and you'll be just fine, kid." And maybe I can figure it out, I thought. Maybe I can endure just a little longer, just long enough to make enough to really get ahead. And with the kind of false reassurances that only come in daylight, I decided that I would go back. There was no way whatever I had experienced in the basement was real. My nerves must have gotten the better of me. I'd follow the rules, keep my head down, and keep my eyes on the prize. On my second night, Ronald made his usual appearance, a same dull uniform, same shuffle to the front desk and repeating the right phrase. "I'm here to clean the mess." I tried to stay out of his way and everything seemed calm, until I noticed that key 309 was missing again. Sticking to the rules, I made my way to the kitchen. It was still stocked with fresh ingredients, which I still couldn't wrap my head around. Who's restocking all this stuff? I thought. But telling myself not to ask or care, I made a simple ham and cheese, and then I took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. The ritual continued as usual. I knocked, kept my gaze down, and I waited. The door creaked open, and this time the person lingered in the doorway even longer than before, clearly waiting for me to make eye contact. I held my ground until I heard the door shut slowly. On my way back, I skipped the elevator altogether. No way was I risking a detour to the basement again. I took the stairs instead, counting each floor down, hoping that nothing else would happen. After night 2 ended without any major surprises, I felt a spark of confidence. You see, just follow the rules, take the stairs down, don't overthink it. Maybe this gig was simpler than I thought. And by the time the night 3 rolled around, I showed up feeling a lot more assured and another 500 richer, and convinced that I had the job figured out. A few more nights went by that were mostly uneventful. The only rule that I ran into during that stretch was Ronald showing up to clean. Even without anything like the first night happening again, the nocturnal schedule had my mind in knots. Each night blended into the next until I could barely keep track of what day it was. I wanted to quit, but I had already made more money in a few nights than I did in weeks at any other job that I had worked. But as soon as I settled in for my 6th shift, it became clear that night 6 had other plans for me. Not long after I started my shift, Ronald made his entrance. I felt a bit relieved to see him. There was something reassuring about having somebody else around, even if he wasn't exactly chatty company. But that night, Ronald seemed different. His uniform looked freshly pressed, like he had actually taken care to look sharp, and his usual sluggish walk had turned into a brisk stride. When he reached the desk, he looked at me with a grin and said, "Time to get this place spick and span." I froze. Ronald had always said the same phrase without fail. My mind scrambled, trying to remember what the rules said about this. He kept staring, his grin unwavering, eyes locked on me like he was waiting for something. And then it hit me. "No cleaning needed tonight, Ronald." As soon as I said that, his smile fell and his expression darkened. Through gritted teeth, he repeated his phrase. "It's time to get this place spick and span." With adrenaline beginning to pump through my body and my heart rate increasing, I repeated with a shaky voice, "No cleaning needed tonight, Ronald." It came out sounding more like a question than a statement, but he backed away slowly, staring at me with contempt until he had reached the door. I waited until he was gone and I locked it tight behind him. His strange behavior, his creepy demeanor, wide smile, fresh clothes. What was wrong with him? What's wrong with this whole place for that matter? I thought that I had figured out the job, but now I wasn't so sure. I began to question if I'd really be able to handle whatever else this hotel had in store. The newfound confidence that I had felt was fading fast. That night, I decided it was time to get a better sense of the place. I thought that maybe exploring a bit would help me get a better grasp of it all or provide me with some logical answers. Armed with my master key, I left the desk behind and wandered down the corridors. Being the only person in a giant hotel felt unnatural and uncanny. I passed rows of tarnished brass fixtures and faded wallpaper, and other remnants of luxury that no longer had anybody to impress. On the 2nd floor, I found the ballroom, a huge, echoing space that seemed frozen in time. Dust coated every surface, and a once sparkling chandelier hung above, its crystals now clouded and covered in cobwebs. I ran my hand along the edge of a table covered in a fine layer of dust, probably the first person to have touched it in decades. For a moment, I tried to imagine what the place must have looked like in its heyday. As I continued my tour, I noticed that most rooms unlocked easily with the master key, but a few doors oddly wouldn't budge. I tried the key, jiggling it and pushing, but it was as if these doors were meant to stay closed, resisting every attempt to pry them open. As I moved up to the 7th floor, I passed a particular room, room 713, that made me stop in my tracks. I could hear a soft voice from inside. I froze, straining to listen. The voice was faint but unmistakably frantic. Somebody was in there. As I drew closer to the door, the voice abruptly stopped. My breath caught and I took a step back, every instinct telling me to leave. As I backed away, I heard heavy footsteps stomp up to the door and stop. With my back against the hallway wall, I stood staring at the door. I knew whoever was inside now was looking at me through the peephole. My mind told me to move, but my feet didn't respond right away. I thought that I saw the doorknob twitch, just the faintest movement, as though somebody inside was reaching for it. Nope, I said to myself and hurried down the hall, leaving the floor entirely. I tried later to convince myself that it was my imagination, but I knew what I heard. Either way, I had no desire to stick around and find out. After exploring the 8th floor, I made my way up to the 9th, which looked just like the others, dimly lit and lined with old doors. With not much else to look at, I decided that I had seen enough for one night. The thought of a long journey down the stairs back to the lobby loomed ahead, but it felt like a welcome return to familiarity. As I turned to head toward the stairwell, I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror mounted on the wall. Looking at myself in the mirror, I couldn't help but notice how tired and beat down I looked. As I was examining myself, almost looking at myself with pity, I saw something else in the mirror. Behind me, down the hall, I saw someone else. A figure standing far behind me at the other end of the hall, peeking at me from around the corner. My body seemed to freeze and withdraw inward, like everything non-essential was being shut down as fear washed over me. I whipped around, but the hallway was empty. I turned back to the mirror and there it was again. The figure was still there, peeking at me from around the corner. It was too far down the hallway to make out any of its features, but it was unmistakable. In that moment, I remembered the rule. Don't look into any mirrors after midnight. And checking my phone, there it was, 1:23 a.m. I burst through the doors of the stairwell and made my way down the 9 flights of stairs as quickly as I could. Finally back at my desk, I sank into the chair, my heart still racing and my breath heavy from the frantic dash down the stairs. I decided to stay put for the rest of the night, unwilling to venture out again. The hours crept by slowly, but the rest of the night was thankfully uneventful. The sun was beginning to rise, and with my shift over, I clocked out, a fresh 500 envelope in hand. Relief flooded over me as I thought about the safety of the morning outside and another night successfully in the books. As I was turning to leave, though, I noticed something. An error, a mistake. Key 309 had been missing and I never noticed it. I never brought the guest of room 309 a ham sandwich. Yet with morning breaking and my shift officially over, I shrugged it off, telling myself that it was too late to go back now. When I finally got home, I was exhausted. I collapsed onto my bed, desperate to catch some sleep after the long night at the hotel. But sleep never comes easily after working the night shift. The unnatural hours played tricks on my body, even with blackout curtains pulled tight against the early morning light. I tossed and turned, restless and unable to fully escape the haunting images of the night. The figure in the mirror, Ronald's strange appearance, and the voice in the room. I knew something was seriously unexplainable and unnatural with the place, but I couldn't let go of the money. The job finally allowed me to catch up on bills and start paying down my loans, which was a huge victory amid the growing unease. For the pay, there could be worse jobs than a haunted hotel, I thought. With little sleep accomplished, I begrudgingly pulled myself up and got ready for another shift, bracing myself for whatever the night would throw my way. When I arrived at the hotel for my shift, a note was waiting for me on the desk. We would like to take a moment to address an important matter regarding your recent shift. It has come to our attention that the guest in room 309 did not experience the high level of service that we strive to provide. As you know, adhering to our established rules and protocols is vital for ensuring an exceptional experience for our guests. safeguarding the esteemed reputation of the Arcadian Hotel, and maintaining your own safety, we would like to remind you the importance of following the rules. In light of this, we would urge you to avoid the kitchen at all costs for the next 24 hours. Additionally, we're pleased to announce that the hotel will soon undergo renovations as part of our commitment to restoring the grandeur of the Arcadian Hotel. The Arcadian Hotel will be preparing for a new grand opening in the coming weeks. Thank you for your dedication to the legacy of the Arcadian. Management. As I read through the letter, a surge of anger bubbled within me. "It's just a damn ham sandwich," I muttered under my breath. And what did they mean by my safety? Avoid the kitchen, I mean why? A wave of annoyance and confusion washed over me as I replayed the past few nights in my head. I want to quit right there on the spot out of frustration. But every time I was ready to quit, the money made me hang on just a little longer. Just enough to really make a difference in my life and finally be ahead. And just as I was stewing in my frustration, Ronald shuffled in back to his usual shabby self. He came in a little earlier than usual, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He moved through the lobby without stopping, and gave me the same line that he always does and went straight toward the custodial closet, like he had somewhere specific to be. "I'm here to clean the mess," he said. As Ronald was getting his cleaning supplies ready, I finally worked up the courage to approach him. "Hey Ronald, can I ask you something? What was with you last night? You seemed different. And what's the deal with all these rules? What are they really for?" At my words, Ronald shot me a sharp look that cut me off, his expression darkening. "Listen, kid," he said, his voice low and serious. "Don't go looking for answers. Don't ask questions, just do your job and follow the rules. Collect your money and keep your head down. It's for your own good." His eyes darted quickly around the room and I caught a hint of fear in them. He then turned away whistling a tune and he went on about his duties. I checked the key rack while he worked. Everything was accounted for. I decided to do it slower now to make it less likely that I'll miss one again. I wrote all the rules down on a notepad. I didn't trust myself to remember them the way that I thought I could. Around 1 in the morning, I heard noise coming from the kitchen. It wasn't subtle, something metallic hit the floor hard enough that I looked up from the desk. I was about to stand up before I remembered the note from management. Avoid the kitchen at all costs for the next 24 hours. The sound came again a moment later, louder this time, followed by crashing, like something had been knocked off a counter and dragged across the room. Then there was the sharp break of plates hitting tile, not just one or two, but several in quick succession, like something was tearing through the kitchen without any care for what it was destroying. After a while, it quieted down. It seemed like whatever was ransacking the kitchen tired itself out or finally found what it was looking for. Just after 1 a.m., a man walked into the hotel wearing a Hawaiian shirt, carrying a leather bag in one hand and a yellow umbrella in the other. He paused just inside the entrance, shook the umbrella out over the floor and then closed it and let out a small sigh. "Ooh-wee," he said, glancing around the lobby. "Sure is a soaker out there tonight." The sight of the umbrella brought the rule back into my mind immediately. I reached for my notebook even though I didn't need to. I've started checking it more often now, even when I'm fairly certain that I remember, just to avoid mixing anything up. And sure enough, Rule 5, if a gentleman with a yellow umbrella comes in asking, "Do you have a vacancy?" you must politely reply, "I'm sorry, we have no vacancy." No matter how upset he gets, stay calm and cheerful. I kept the notebook open on the desk as he approached. He set his leather bag down and stopped in front of me, still wearing a friendly expression. "Do you have a vacancy?" he asked. "I'm sorry," I said, keeping myself steady. "We have no vacancy." He nodded slowly like he was processing that and then gave a small laugh. "Oh, come on, son," he said. "Surely you've got something. I don't take up much space, wouldn't even know that I was here." I glanced down at the notebook again and then back up. "I'm sorry," I repeated. "We have no vacancy." He kept smiling, but it started to look more deliberate than before. He leaned slightly closer. "You don't want to send a man back out in weather like this, do you?" He stood back up straight and gave a small chuckle. "Now, one room, please." I repeated the line again, trying my best to sound calm and cheerful despite my growing nervousness. "I'm sorry, we have no vacancy." The friendliness drained out of his face for a moment. Then almost carefully, he lifted the corners of his mouth again. For a second, it looked like we were both standing there following different sets of instructions that didn't quite fit together. He stood at the desk and now tapping his finger. I could tell that he was considering his next words. Before he could speak again, I repeated the phrase again, just like the rules had said. I tried to sound polite, but it came out sounding more sheepish than I intended. "I'm sorry, we have no vacancy." And that was when his expression changed fully. He placed both hands on the counter and looked down, shaking his head. When he looked back up, he wasn't smiling anymore. He looked angry. Angry enough that for a moment I thought he was going to reach behind the desk and grab me. He turned away and knocked over a chair, pushing it hard enough that it scraped across the floor. And then he walked further into the lobby and knocked over one of the small tables near the seating area, sending the lamp on it crashing down. He moved between the furniture as he went, knocking things aside as he passed. His voice raised now as he muttered under his breath. I couldn't make out anything that he was saying, but as he moved through the lobby, I caught fragments of it. "No vacancy, no vacancy," he muttered once, and then a little louder. "That's not how it's supposed to go." He said something else that I didn't catch clearly, something about hospitality and standards. When he finally turned back toward the entrance, he didn't say anything else to me. He just walked out the same way that he came in, still holding the umbrella in his hand, the leather bag hanging low at his side. I waited until the doors shut behind him. The second they closed, I was already out from behind the desk, moving faster than I thought I could. I reached the doors and locked the first bolt and then the second, rechecking both afterward even though I knew I had just locked them. I cleaned the lobby and put all of the furniture the man had knocked over back in its place. I stayed behind the desk for a while without moving much and just watching the front of the lobby and listening to the sound of the air conditioning turning on and off. At some point, I stopped paying attention to anything in particular. My head kept dropping forward and I would catch myself, straighten up and try to stay awake. Eventually, I stopped catching myself. At some point, I woke up, snapping upright with that immediate disorientation where you forget where you are for a second and then it all comes back in pieces. I stayed still for a moment until it settled, and then I wiped my face and sat up straighter behind the desk. The clock read just after 3 a.m. Just a few more hours, I thought. I looked around the lobby to get my bearings again, the desk, the key rack, the front doors. Everything was where it was supposed to be. I did a double take on the keys though when something looked out of place. One of the keys to the 10th floor was missing. "Oh shit," I said, getting up too fast and pushing the chair back as I went over to the rack. I checked underneath it first and then along the floor, thinking maybe that it had slipped off or gotten caught somewhere when I was counting them earlier. I went back over the hooks one by one slower this time, actually touching each space to make sure that I wasn't missing it. And then I crouched down and checked under the desk, along the baseboards and even behind the front counter, thinking maybe that it had slipped off or fallen when I wasn't paying attention. I moved out into the lobby next, scanning the floor around the seating area, under the tables and along the edges of the walls, even near the front doors where things usually ended up if they got knocked loose. I checked the rug by the stairs, the space behind the planter, the corners where dust and loose things tended to collect. I kept thinking that I would find it sitting somewhere obvious and that I would feel stupid for panicking. But it wasn't there. I went back to the desk and pulled the notebook toward me. Rule number 4. Every night count all the keys on the board. Make sure that all the keys are accounted for. Most importantly, there should always be 4 keys marked for the 10th floor. If one of those keys is missing, lock up the lobby doors, turn off the lights, and wait behind the front desk until dawn. Do not attempt to look for it. I closed my eyes in frustration and slammed the notebook down. Well, that's great, I already looked for it, so now what? I said louder than I meant to, angry at the page in front of me like it was supposed to respond. All right, this is okay, this is fine, just wait behind the counter, no problem, I said under my breath, trying to pull it back together. I went straight to the lobby lights and shut them off one by one, muttering to myself about being done with this job the whole time that I did. When everything was dark, I used my phone light to make my way back behind the front desk to wait for dawn. I wasn't exactly thrilled to be sitting in the dark, but eventually I settled back in to wait for dawn. My lack of sleep was catching up on me and I began to doze back off. But the sound of the elevator chime made me jump. The red down arrow on the indicator began to pulse and a low hum filled the shaft. Each flash of light cut through the lobby for a moment before disappearing again. I stayed behind the front desk, watching it and realizing that someone was coming down. The elevator beeped again and stopped at the lobby. I didn't wait to see it properly. I ducked down behind the desk so I was out of sight, keeping my head low and my eyes on the floor. The doors opened. I heard them close again after a few seconds and the room returned to darkness. It moved away from the elevator slowly. Its cadence was hard to describe, a mix of dragging and something like stumbling forward, with brief pauses in between. It kept coming, passing the seating area and then moving into the open space in front of the desk. I stayed still behind the counter, but I could hear it getting closer without needing to see it. It stopped directly in front of the desk. For a moment, there was silence, and then I heard it above me on the counter itself. I could hear the front desk creaking and groaning under the weight of it. It reached the edge of the desk above me and stopped. And then something heavy dropped down behind the counter, right next to where I was hiding, landing with a loud, wet thud. A pathetic mix of a gasp and a scream left my mouth. I didn't think about it. I stood up immediately and I ran to the first door that I could find. I reached it, pulled it open and got inside, and slammed it shut behind me before locking it. I stood with my hands against the door, a mix of fear and a brief sense of safety coming from the locked door between me and whatever that thing was. I looked down at my feet and saw an old green carpet beneath me, worn flat in patches like it had been walked on for years. I realized then that it was a room that I had never been in. I realized then that in my haste, the door that I had chosen was the management office. Rule number 8 immediately came to the front of my mind. In my fear and panic, I had ignored everything else. Every rule that I had been carefully following up to that point, I had run on primal instinct. But now that I was behind the door and nothing was immediately chasing me, complex thought returned all at once. Rule number 8. It's important that you remember this. Never, and I mean never, enter the management office. If you happen to find the door slightly ajar, just keep on walking and mind your business. And if you hear any peculiar sounds coming from inside, don't let your curiosity get the better of you. Simply carry on with your tasks. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the knob, afraid to look, and waiting for something to happen. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I remember thinking that it would not just be nothing. But when nothing came, I slowly turned around. I half expected to see someone or something behind me. Hell, maybe some type of demon or maybe a room full of the hotel's past victims. Instead, there was only a plain desk pushed against the wall, a dim desk lamp switched on, and a row of surveillance screens mounted above it. The screens showed the lobby, the hallways, the stairwell, the elevator, everywhere. The office was quiet and empty. I stood there trying to understand why a room like this existed. It was strange even seeing screens at all, something so modern and ordinary compared to everything else in the hotel. I stepped forward to get a closer look. The desk had a thick book sitting open on top of it. I looked down at it and started reading. It was a logbook of times and activities, my activities. I flipped through the pages and found all of my nights recorded there. Everything that I had experienced and done. Every instance where I had followed a rule or failed to follow one. Logging the state of the hotel. Situations that felt terrifying and traumatic to me were reduced to short, clinical entries in the logbook. It wasn't just my activities either. As I kept going back through the book, I realized that it had been recording attendance long before me as well. Different names and different shifts. The same kinds of entries repeated with slight variations. My attention shifted forward though to the most recent entries. Yellow umbrella guest enters lobby. Attendant denies vacancy per protocol. Guest escalation begins. Lobby disturbance recorded. Guest exits premises. Front door secured. Attendant falls asleep behind front desk. Attendant wakes. 10th floor key discrepancy detected. Searching for missing key initiated against protocol. Attendant attempts to regain Rule 4 compliance. Lights off, lobby secured. Elevator activation detected. Upper floor guest enters the lobby. Attendant disobeys Rule 4. Abandons instructed position behind the desk. Attendant disobeys Rule 8. Enters management office. The final entry caught my attention, and for a moment I just stared at it. I felt a coldness run through me that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I remember standing there completely still, unable to look away, with the strange and immediate sense that I wasn't alone. I stood up straight, backing away from the desk. The feeling of being watched wasn't subtle, and it didn't build gradually the way that fear usually does. It was just there, complete, like a conclusion I had arrived at without understanding why or how. In that moment, I made a decision without really thinking it through. I was going to leave. Not walk out carefully, not collect anything, not try to understand what any of it meant. I was going to get out of the office, make it back to the lobby, and go straight for the front doors without stopping for anything. I turned and moved for the door, fast now, not allowing myself to look back. I swung it open, expecting that thing to be waiting for me. I readied myself for a mad dash through the dark lobby. But when I swung open the door, the lobby was exactly as it had always been. The lights were on, the air conditioning hummed. Everything looked completely normal. I quickly walked out of the office instead of running, and something in me broke slightly as I crossed back into the space. It was something close to anger mixed with disbelief, betrayal, and exhaustion. The feeling of being pushed past the point where fear had anything useful left to offer. "I'm done," I yelled, my voice echoing loudly in the large space. "You hear me? I'm done. I quit." And I didn't wait for anything after that. I just left the hotel and made my way back to my apartment, looking over my shoulder the whole way and jumping at every sound. When I finally got inside, I was completely drained. I don't remember much after that. I just collapsed and fell asleep. A knock at the door woke me up later. I got up and looked through the people, but all I saw was the end of somebody at the far end of the hallway. I only caught them for a second before they turned the corner and disappeared. I stood there for a moment and then slowly opened the door to find an envelope waiting on the floor. Inside was $500 cash and a final handwritten note. We would like to take a moment to thank you for your wonderful service here at the Arcadian Hotel. We truly appreciate the effort and care that you've shown during your time with us. Enclosed is your final payment. Don't go spending it all at once. After careful review of recent rule compliance, we regret to inform you that your service to the Arcadian Hotel has come to an end. We will of course be moving forward with the selection of a new night attendant to continue upholding our high standards of hospitality. We want to sincerely thank you for your contribution to the Arcadian legacy. And of course, thank you for always remembering that at the Arcadian, hotel matters are private matters, as part of the spirit of good hospitality. Management.